Welcome to HOA Control Freaks. The HOA wanted control, not safety. I work as a cybersecurity analyst, which means I save every email and timestamp like my life depends on it. And that habit just saved me from the most vindictive HOA power trip I have ever seen. My name does not matter, but the story does, so settle in. I pulled into my driveway at 6 in the morning after a night shift, and the tow truck was already there. Not pulling up, already there. The wheel lift was inches from my rear tire, and Teresa Parker, the special assessment coordinator for the Rosewood Terrace Association here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, was standing beside the driver with a clipboard like she had been camping out waiting for me. She smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile you see right before someone ruins your day on purpose. I got out of my car and she stepped forward, holding up one hand like a traffic cop. Teresa, I need you to step back from the vehicle. This unit is being relocated for non-compliance parking violations under Section 12-4 of the Community Guidelines. I glanced at the driver. He would not look at me. I looked back at Teresa. What violation? I park in my own driveway. She tapped her clipboard. You received notice 72 hours ago that guest parking decals are now required for any vehicle registered outside the primary homeowner name. Your vehicle does not display a valid decal. Under the new emergency amendment, non-compliant vehicles are subject to immediate removal. I did not receive any notice. I checked my mail yesterday. Nothing. She tilted her head, and that smile got wider. Notices are posted digitally on the resident portal and considered delivered upon upload. That happened Wednesday at 11 p.m. You are now past the 72-hour grace period. It was Saturday. I did the math in my head. 72 hours from Wednesday at 11 p.m. would have been late Friday night, which meant she was counting weekend hours and claiming I had missed a deadline that technically ended while I was at work. I felt my jaw tighten. I opened my phone and pulled up the resident portal. There was no notice. The last update was from 2 weeks ago about pool maintenance. She saw me scrolling and her smile did not budge. The system logs show it was posted. If you are having technical difficulties accessing the portal, that is not the association's responsibility. Now step back so the driver can complete the relocation. She pulled out a handheld plate scanner and aimed it at my car like she was processing evidence at a crime scene. I heard the beep. She turned the screen away so I could not see what it said, then nodded to the driver. He started lowering the wheel lift toward my tire. Wait. I stepped closer. If there is a rule change, I need to see the actual amendment. You cannot just make up a 72-hour deadline in the middle of the night and tow people without proof. Teresa held up the clipboard. There was a blank badge clip attached to the top. No paper. She did not seem to care. I do not care what you think, I care what the rule says. And the rule says non-compliant vehicles are subject to immediate tow. If you would like to dispute this, you can file a formal appeal with the Compliance Committee. The next meeting is in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. My car would be in the tow yard by then, racking up daily storage fees. I felt the panic start to creep in, but I forced it down. I kept my voice low because my trump card needed perfect timing and I was not ready to play it yet. Fine. What is the fee to get the decal? She flipped the clipboard over like she was checking. $250 per vehicle, plus a $50 application processing fee, plus any outstanding compliance charges. In your case, that would include the $72 emergency amendment late fee and the $120 parking inspection surcharge. I stared at her. You are charging me over $500 for a sticker? She shrugged. The board voted on the fee structure last month. It is designed to offset the cost of enforcement and vendor contracts. Vendor contracts. I glanced at the tow truck. The company name was painted on the side, and I made a mental note to look them up later. This whole thing smelled like a kickback scheme, but I did not have time to dig into that right now. The tow yard closes at noon on Saturdays, and if my vehicle got taken, I could not recover it until Monday. That meant 2 extra days of storage fees, and I was in the middle of a renovation schedule where every delay could cost me thousands in contractor penalties. The driver started lifting. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The moment the camera came up, Teresa stepped directly into the frame, blocking my view of the truck. Excuse me. Recording HOA enforcement activities without prior written consent is a violation of privacy guidelines under Section 9-2. You need to put that away. I did not lower the phone. I am recording on my own property. That is legal. She leaned in closer, and I could see the tiny body camera clipped to her jacket. Her camera was rolling too. Then you are also in violation of obstruction of enforcement, which carries an additional $200 fine per incident. I can put you on the agenda and keep you there. There it was, the line she loved to use. I had heard her say it to 3 other neighbors in the past 6 months, always with that same smug tone like she was collecting scalps. I made a note of it. That line was going to come back to bite her. The wheel lift locked into place with a loud clank, and my car tilted backward. The driver walked around to the cab and climbed in. Teresa turned to follow him, then looked back at me. You have until noon to pay the relocation fee at the tow yard. After that, it goes up $50 per day. Have a nice morning. She walked away. The truck started rolling forward, pulling my car with it. I stood there in the damp morning air, watching the taillights disappear around the corner, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. This was not about parking. This was about control. Teresa had a target list, and I was on it. I went inside and pulled up my email. I have a system. Every message the HOA sends gets archived in a dedicated folder with timestamps and screenshots. Every rule change, every notice, every vague threat. I scrolled back to Wednesday night. Nothing. I checked my spam folder. Nothing. I logged into the resident portal on my desktop and checked the activity log. The last admin update was 2 weeks ago. No 72-hour notice. No emergency amendment. I took screenshots. Then I forwarded the portal log to my personal backup email, just in case the HOA decided to edit the records later. I had seen them do it before. Last year, a neighbor got fined for late landscaping compliance, and when he showed up to the hearing with his original email showing a different deadline, the board claimed the email system had malfunctioned, and the archived version on the portal was the official record. He lost the appeal and paid the fine. I was not going to let that happen to me. I called the tow yard. A bored voice answered on the 4th ring. Yeah. I need to pick up my vehicle. It was just towed from Rosewood Terrace. The voice sighed. Hold on. I heard papers shuffling. Yeah, I got it. Silver sedan, right? That is it. What is the fee? $340 for the tow, plus $60 for the first day storage, plus the HOA compliance release fee. That is another $200. So $600 total. I felt my stomach drop. $600, and my car had been hooked less than an hour ago. What compliance release fee? The voice sounded annoyed now. The HOA has a contract with us. Any tow initiated by HOA enforcement requires a compliance release form signed by the coordinator before we can release the vehicle. If you do not have the form, you pay the fee, and we hold the car until the HOA sends the release. Usually takes 3 to 5 business days. 3 to 5 business days. I did the math. Monday was a holiday. That meant Wednesday at the earliest, and by then the storage fees would be over $300 on top of the initial $600. I was looking at close to $1,000, and I still did not have the decal Teresa claimed I needed. I kept my voice calm. Can I pay the fee now and pick up the car? Not without the release form. HOA rule. If you want to dispute it, you need to talk to them. I hung up and called the HOA management company. The voicemail picked up immediately. You have reached the offices of Cascade Property Management. Our business hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. If this is an emergency, please contact your local emergency services. For all other inquiries, please leave a message, and we will return your call within 2 business days. 2 business days. By then, my car would be buried in fees, and Teresa would be grinning like she had won the lottery. I left a message anyway, keeping my tone professional. This is a resident of Rosewood Terrace calling about an unauthorized tow and a rule violation notice that was never properly delivered. I need someone to call me back today. My number is... The voicemail beeped and cut me off. I hung up and stared at the phone. Teresa had timed this perfectly. Weekend tow, holiday Monday, management company closed until Tuesday. She knew exactly what she was doing. I went back to my email and started digging. 2 months ago, the board had sent out a notice about updated parking guidelines. I pulled it up and read through it. Guest parking decals were mentioned, but only as an optional amenity for residents who frequently hosted visitors. The fee was listed as $50 per vehicle per year, and the notice explicitly stated that the decal program was voluntary and would not affect existing parking privileges for homeowner-registered vehicles. I highlighted the key sentence and printed 3 copies, one for me, one for the lawyer I was about to call, and one for the board meeting I was going to demand. Then I kept digging. 3 weeks ago, the board had sent another notice about a special assessment vote. The meeting minutes were attached, but when I opened the file, half the pages were missing. The part about parking enforcement was gone, replaced with a note that said, "Additional amendments pending legal review." Pending legal review. That meant the rule Teresa had cited did not officially exist yet. She was enforcing a draft policy like it was already law, and she was using a tow vendor with a financial incentive to hook first and ask questions later. I saved the email chain and forwarded it to my backup account. Then I called my neighbor Marcus. He lived 3 houses down and had been on the receiving end of Teresa's enforcement spree last month when she tried to fine him for having a work truck parked in his driveway overnight. Marcus had fought back, and he had saved every message Teresa sent him. If anyone had dirt on her, it was him.
He picked up on the second ring. Hey, what is up?
Teresa just had my car towed. No notice, no warning. She is claiming some emergency amendment about guest decals, but I cannot find it anywhere. Marcus laughed, but it was not a happy sound. Yeah, she pulled the same thing on me. Except with me, it was about commercial vehicle restrictions. She sent me an email at 10 p.m. on a Friday, then showed up at 6 a.m. Saturday with a citation and a tow threat. I told her to shove it, and she backed off when I threatened to call a lawyer. Did you ever get a copy of the actual rule she was citing? Nope. She kept saying it was in the amended guidelines, but when I asked for a copy, she told me to check the portal. The portal had nothing. I filed a records request with the management company, and they sent me a PDF that did not match what she was claiming. Turns out she was making up half the rules as she went. I felt a spark of hope. Do you still have those messages? Every single one. Screenshots, timestamps, the whole thing. Why? Because I need proof that she is running a pattern, and I need it before noon. Can you send me everything you have? Give me 10 minutes. He hung up, and I went back to my computer. I opened a new document and started building a timeline. Wednesday night, alleged notice posted to portal. No record of upload. Saturday morning, tow initiated without physical notice or confirmation of receipt. Management company closed. Tow yard holding vehicle ransom with compliance release requirement. No valid rule on file with management company. My phone buzzed. Marcus had sent a zip file with 23 screenshots. I opened them one by one. Messages from Teresa claiming violations that did not exist. Threats of fines with no supporting documentation. A voicemail where she told him, "I do not care what you think, I care what the rule says," which was the exact same line she had used on me. She had a script, and she was using it on everyone. I saved the file and added it to my evidence folder. Then I did something Teresa probably did not expect. I called the tow company owner directly. His number was on the website, listed under customer service. A gruff voice answered after 2 rings. This is Bill. Hi, Bill. I am calling about a tow your company just did for Rosewood Terrace Association. My car was hooked this morning without any notice, and I am being told I need a compliance release form to get it back. Can you walk me through that process? There was a pause. Who is this? I am the vehicle owner. I live in the community, and I am trying to understand why my car was towed when I was parked in my own driveway. Another pause. Look, I just do what the HOA tells me. They call, I send a truck. If they say tow it, I tow it. You got a problem with that? Take it up with them. I kept my tone calm. I understand. But the compliance release fee, is that an HOA requirement or a company policy? HOA requirement. They added it to the contract last month. Any vehicle we tow for them, we hold it until they give us the release. It is in the agreement. Do you have a copy of that agreement? Why do you want it? Because I am being charged $600 for a tow that happened without proper notice, and I want to make sure everything is legal. If the HOA added that fee without board approval, that is a problem for both of us. Bill went quiet. Then he said, "Look, I do not want trouble. If you think something is fishy, call the management company. I just run the trucks." I appreciate that. But if it turns out the HOA coordinator was feeding you a target list without proper authorization, you might want to know about it. Because if this goes to court, your company name is going to be on the complaint. He hung up. I smiled. That was not a denial. That was a man who just realized he might be getting sued. I checked the time. It was 7:30. I had 4.5 hours until the tow yard closed. I needed to move fast. I drove to Teresa's house. She lived 4 blocks away, in one of the larger units that backed up to the community park. When I pulled up, she was outside setting up a folding sign stand on the curb in front of her driveway. The sign had no readable text, but I could see the bright yellow and black color scheme. No parking. Fire lane. Tow zone. Pick your poison. I parked across the street and got out with my phone already recording. Teresa looked up and saw me. Her expression shifted from surprise to annoyed in about half a second. She straightened up and walked toward me, one hand on her hip. "You need to leave. This is private property." I stayed on the sidewalk, which was public. "I am here to ask you about the compliance release form you filed with the tow company. Where is the signed board authorization for the 72-hour notice rule?" She stopped about 10 feet away and crossed her arms. "That information is available through the proper channels. If you want to file a records request, contact the management company." I already did. They are closed until Tuesday. My car is being held ransom in the meantime, and you know it. She smiled. "That sounds like a personal problem." I held up my phone. "I am recording this. Do you have a signed board authorization for the rule you cited this morning, yes or no?" Her smile faded. "Recording me without consent is a violation of..." I cut her off. Idaho is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I am part of. Now answer the question. She turned and walked back toward her house. I followed her along the sidewalk, keeping my distance but staying in frame. "Teresa, if you do not have board authorization, that tow was illegal. The management company is going to want to know that." She spun around, and for the first time I saw real anger in her face. "You want to play lawyer? Fine, I will see you at the hearing. And when the board votes to uphold every single fine, you are going to wish you had just paid the fee and moved on. I can put you on the agenda and keep you there." There it was again. Same line, same tone. I made sure the recording caught it. Then I walked back to my car and drove away. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing with messages. Marcus had sent me 3 more files. One was a PDF of the original parking guidelines from 2 years ago before Teresa joined the board. The guest decal program did not exist back then. Another file was a chain of emails between Marcus and the management company, where the property manager explicitly stated that homeowner-registered vehicles were exempt from guest parking restrictions. The third file was a recording of a board meeting from 6 months ago, where Teresa had proposed a comprehensive parking enforcement initiative, and 2 board members had voted against it, saying it was too aggressive and legally risky. I watched the recording twice. Teresa had argued that selective enforcement was necessary to maintain property values and deter violations. One of the board members, an older man named Ed, had asked her how she planned to determine which vehicles were non-compliant. Teresa's answer was telling. "We will use a handheld scanner system to cross-reference plates with the homeowner registry. Any vehicle not on the list gets flagged." Ed had pointed out that the scanner system would cost the association over $15,000. Teresa had waved him off. "The vendor is offering a revenue share model. Every tow generates a referral fee that offsets the equipment cost." There it was. The kickback scheme. Teresa was getting a cut of every tow, and she had turned the community into a hunting ground. I saved the recording and added it to my evidence folder. Then I called an attorney. Not an HOA specialist, but a friend from college who did contract litigation. His name was Kevin, and he owed me a favor from 5 years ago when I helped him recover data from a crashed laptop during a major case. He picked up on the first ring. "Hey, long time. What is going on?" "I need advice on an HOA tow situation. It is messy, and I think there is fraud involved." He listened while I walked him through the timeline. When I got to the part about the vendor revenue share model, he stopped me. "Wait, she admitted that in a board meeting?" "On video. I have the recording. That is a conflict of interest. If she is personally benefiting from enforcement actions, she has a fiduciary duty to disclose it. If she did not disclose it, the board can remove her, and you can sue for damages." "What about the tow? Can I get my car back without paying the ransom fee?" "You can file an emergency motion for wrongful repossession, but that takes time. Faster option is to pay the fee under protest, then sue for reimbursement plus damages. You will win, especially if you can prove the rule was never properly adopted." I felt a weight lift. What do I need to do? Get everything documented. Every email, every notice, every recording. Then file a formal complaint with the management company and the board. Copy the HOA attorney. If Teresa is running a side deal with the tow vendor, the attorney is going to freak out, because that is liability the association cannot afford. I can do that. Good. And one more thing. If the tow yard is holding your car under a compliance release requirement that was never authorized by the board, that is extortion. You can file a police report. Will the police actually do anything? Probably not, but it creates a paper trail. If this goes to court, you want every possible record showing that you tried to resolve it through proper channels and got stonewalled. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat down and started drafting the complaint. It took me 2 hours. I laid out the timeline, attached every piece of evidence, and cited the specific bylaws Teresa had violated. Then I wrote a separate email to the HOA attorney, copying the property manager and the board president. The subject line was, "Urgent Potential Liability Issue Re. Unauthorized Parking Enforcement." I hit send at 9:45. Then I called the tow yard and told them I was coming to pay the fee under protest and that I would be filing a complaint with the State Consumer Protection Division. The voice on the phone sounded nervous. "Look, man, I just work here. You got a problem? Talk to Bill." "I am planning on it." I drove to the tow yard and paid the $600 in cash. I made them give me an itemized receipt with every fee broken out. Then I took a photo of my car still sitting on the lot with the wheel lift marks visible on the rear bumper. The attendant watched me do it and did not say a word. I got in my car and drove home. My phone buzzed before I even made it out of the lot. It was an email from the HOA attorney. The subject line was, Urgent Potential Liability Issue Re. Unauthorized Parking Enforcement. I pulled over and opened it. The attorney, a woman named Linda Sue, had written 3 sentences. "I have reviewed your complaint and the attached documentation. I am scheduling an emergency board meeting for Monday at 6 p.m. to address these allegations. Please plan to attend." I smiled. That was faster than I expected. Linda was not messing around, which meant she had seen enough red flags to know this could blow up into a lawsuit. When I got home, there was a note taped to my front door. It was printed on HOA letterhead, and it was signed by Teresa. The note said, "Final notice necessary compliance inspection scheduled for Monday at 8 a.m. Failure to permit access will result in a $500 obstruction fine and referral to legal counsel." I took a photo of the note, then I called Kevin. He answered on the second ring. That was fast. What happened? The attorney scheduled an emergency board meeting for Monday, but Teresa just left a note on my door threatening another inspection and a $500 fine if I do not let her in. Do not let her in. That is harassment. Forward me the photo of the note, and I will draft a cease and desist letter. If she shows up Monday morning, do not open the door. Call the police and tell them someone is trespassing. What if the board sides with her? They will not. Not after the attorney reads your evidence. Teresa is a liability now, and the board knows it. They are going to cut her loose to save the association from a lawsuit. I hoped he was right. Monday morning came fast. I woke up at 6 and made coffee. At 7:30, I heard a car pull up outside. I looked out the window and saw Teresa's sedan parked in front of my house. She got out with her clipboard and her body camera and walked up to my front door. She knocked 3 times, loud and deliberate. I did not answer. I stood in the hallway with my phone recording through the window. She knocked again, then pulled out her own phone and started recording the door. After a minute, she stepped back and looked directly at the camera on her jacket. Homeowner refused to permit compliance inspection as required under Emergency Amendment 6-3. This will be documented and referred to legal counsel for enforcement action. She walked back to her car and drove away. I forwarded the video to Kevin. Then I called the non-emergency police line and filed a report for trespassing and harassment. The dispatcher sounded skeptical, but she took the report and gave me a case number. At 6 p.m., I walked into the HOA clubhouse for the emergency board meeting. The room was packed. Marcus was there, along with 4 other neighbors who had gotten hit with Teresa's enforcement campaign. Teresa sat at the front table with the board president, a man named Greg, and 2 other board members. Linda Sue, the attorney, sat off to the side with a thick folder in front of her. Greg called the meeting to order and immediately turned to Linda. "Linda, you called this meeting. What is going on?" Linda opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. "I received a formal complaint on Saturday alleging that the Special Assessment Coordinator, Teresa Parker, initiated unauthorized parking enforcement actions using a vendor contract that was never approved by the board. The complaint includes evidence that Ms. Parker may be personally benefiting from enforcement revenue, which would constitute a conflict of interest and a breach of fiduciary duty." The room went silent. Greg looked at Teresa. "Is that true?" Teresa's face went red. "That is a completely baseless accusation. The vendor contract was approved last month during the budget review session." Linda shook her head. "I have reviewed the meeting minutes from last month. There is no record of a vendor contract approval. The minutes show that the board approved a general parking enforcement budget line item, but no specific vendor agreement was authorized." Teresa stood up. "The board delegated enforcement authority to my committee. I have the discretion to engage vendors as needed to fulfill my duties." Linda looked at her over the top of her reading glasses. "Your committee authority does not extend to signing contracts that create financial liability for the association. And it certainly does not allow you to enter into revenue share agreements without disclosure. Did you disclose your financial interest in the tow vendor contract?" Teresa froze. "I do not have a financial interest. The referral fees go to the association." Linda pulled out another document. "This is a copy of the vendor agreement you signed. It clearly states that a percentage of tow fees will be paid to the enforcement coordinator as an administrative service fee. That is you, Ms. Parker. You are receiving money from every tow. If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more HOA drama and satisfying payback tales." The room erupted. Greg banged his hand on the table. Everyone quiet. "Teresa, did you sign this agreement?" Teresa sat down slowly. Her face had gone from red to pale. "Yes, but it was approved by..." "By who?" Greg's voice was sharp now. "Because it was not approved by this board. It was approved by the management company." Linda shook her head. "I spoke to the property manager this morning. He confirmed that no vendor contract was submitted for review. You signed this on your own authority and never disclosed the fee arrangement." Teresa looked around the room. Her eyes landed on me, and for a second I saw panic. Then she pointed at me. "He is the one who violated the parking rules. He is just trying to deflect because he does not want to pay the fine." I stood up. "I did not violate any rule. The rule you cited does not exist. The emergency amendment was never adopted by the board, and you know it." Linda nodded. "That is correct. I reviewed the association bylaws this morning. Any amendment to parking restrictions requires a board vote and a 30-day notice period to homeowners. The alleged 72-hour rule was never voted on, never posted, and never legally enforceable." Teresa's clipboard slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She bent down to pick it up, and I saw her handheld scanner fall out of her jacket pocket and skitter across the tile. It hit the leg of a chair, and the screen cracked. She grabbed it and shoved it back in her pocket, but everyone had seen it. Greg looked at Linda. What do we do? Linda closed the folder. The association needs to terminate the vendor contract immediately to limit liability. Any tow fees collected under the unauthorized enforcement actions need to be refunded, and Ms. Parker needs to step down from her coordinator role while we conduct a full audit. Teresa stood up so fast her chair tipped over. You cannot do this. I have been enforcing the rules exactly as they are written. Linda looked at her. You have been enforcing rules that do not exist and profiting from it. That is fraud, Ms. Parker. If you do not resign, the board can remove you for cause, and I will be recommending that the association file a complaint with the State Attorney General. Teresa stared at her, then at Greg, then at me. Her face twisted into something ugly. Fine. You want to run this place into the ground? Go ahead. I am done. She grabbed her clipboard and her jacket and stormed out. The door slammed behind her, and the room stayed silent for a long moment. Greg rubbed his face. Linda, what do we need to do to fix this? Linda pulled out a checklist. First, we notify the tow vendor that the contract is void. Second, we issue refunds to every homeowner who was charged under the unauthorized enforcement actions. Third, we send a formal apology letter to the affected residents. And fourth, we schedule a special board meeting to adopt proper parking guidelines with full homeowner notice and input. Greg nodded. How much is this going to cost? Linda did not sugarcoat it. Between refunds, legal fees, and potential settlements, you are looking at $20,000 to $30,000. If anyone decides to sue, it could be more. Greg winced. Great. I raised my hand. Can I say something? Greg waved me forward. Go ahead. I walked to the front and pulled out a folder. I have been documenting Teresa's enforcement actions for the past 6 months. I have emails, recordings, screenshots, and witness statements from 5 other homeowners who were targeted. If the board wants to avoid a lawsuit, I am willing to settle for a full refund of my tow fees, a formal apology, and a commitment to adopt transparent parking policies with homeowner input. But I want the audit results made public. Because if Teresa was doing this, I want to know who else on the board knew about it. Greg looked at Linda. Is that reasonable? Linda nodded. That is more than reasonable. I recommend the board accept those terms and move forward with the audit. Greg looked around the table. The other 2 board members nodded. All right. We accept. Linda, draft the settlement and the apology letter. And schedule the audit for next week. I sat down. Marcus leaned over and whispered, that was beautiful. The meeting wrapped up 20 minutes later. As I walked out, I saw Teresa sitting in her car in the parking lot. She was on her phone, and she was crying. I did not stop. 2 weeks later, the audit results came out. A management audit exposed the pattern. Teresa had signed 3 separate vendor contracts without board approval, and she had collected over $12,000 in referral fees over the past 8 months. The management company fired her coordinator role immediately, and the board voted to ban her from holding any HOA position for 5 years. The HOA attorney forced a reversal to reduce liability. Every tow fee was refunded, and the association sent formal apology letters to 11 homeowners who had been targeted. The tow vendor contract was terminated, and the company owner, Bill, sent me a private email apologizing for his role in the mess. He said he had not realized Teresa was operating without board authority, and he offered to testify if needed. I forwarded the email to Linda, and she added it to the case file. Karen stormed out when the vote went against her, and everyone saw it. She tried to rally support on the neighborhood Facebook group, posting a long rant about how the board had betrayed her and how enforcement was going to collapse without her leadership. The post got deleted by the group admin within an hour, and 3 neighbors commented with screenshots of Teresa's threatening messages. She deleted her account the next day. The best part came a month later. The new parking guidelines were adopted with full homeowner input, and the guest decal program was made optional and free. The board also passed a transparency rule requiring all vendor contracts to be posted on the resident portal with full cost breakdowns. At the meeting where the new rules were adopted, one of the board members read Teresa's old line out loud. I can put you on the agenda and keep you there. Then he said, that ends today. The room applauded. I ran into Teresa one more time, about 6 weeks after the settlement. I was at a gas station on the edge of the subdivision filling up my car when she pulled in on the opposite side of the pump island. She saw me and her face went tight. She got out and walked toward me, and for a second I thought she was going to start yelling. But she stopped about 10 feet away and just stared. I kept pumping. She kept staring. Finally, she said, "You ruined everything." I looked at her. "No. You did that yourself." She turned and walked back to her car. She did not say anything else. A week later, I got an email from the board. The subject line was, "Final Audit Report, Rosewood Terrace Parking Enforcement Review." I opened it and skimmed through the summary. The audit confirmed everything I had suspected. Teresa had been feeding the tow vendor a target list based on personal grudges and homeowner complaints she had received during her committee meetings. The list included 12 names, and mine was third. The vendor had been instructed to prioritize those addresses and hook vehicles without waiting for board authorization. The audit also found that Teresa had been pocketing a portion of the administrative service fees and using the money to fund her enforcement activities, including buying the handheld scanner and printing fake compliance notices. The total amount she had collected was over $15,000, and the board was referring the case to law enforcement for potential fraud charges. I printed the report and filed it with the rest of my evidence. Then I sent a copy to Kevin, just in case Teresa tried to retaliate. He read it and called me an hour later. "This is textbook fraud. If the DA picks it up, she is going to jail." I do not care about that. I just wanted my car back and my money refunded.
You got both, and you got her out of power. That is a win.
He was right. It was a win. But the best part was not the refund or the apology letter. It was the third-party inspection report I had been holding the whole time. 3 months before Teresa towed my car, I had hired an independent inspector to review my property for compliance with all HOA guidelines. The inspector had checked everything: landscaping, paint, parking, structural modifications, fence heights, mailbox placement, driveway conditions, exterior lighting, and fire lane clearances. The report was 22 pages long, and the final section was a compliance certification signed by a licensed inspector and notarized. It stated that my property met or exceeded all requirements under the Rosewood Terrace Association governing documents as of the inspection date. I had kept that report in a locked file cabinet, waiting for the right moment to use it. Teresa had given me that moment when she claimed I was violating parking rules that did not exist. At the emergency board meeting, after Linda exposed the vendor contract fraud, I had pulled out a second copy of the inspection report and handed it to the HOA attorney, so the legal risk was obvious. Linda had read through it in silence, then looked at Teresa and said, "This report proves that your enforcement actions had no basis in fact. If this goes to court, the association is going to lose, and you are going to be personally liable." That was the moment Teresa's face had gone pale. That was the moment she knew she had lost. The trump card had worked. Not because it was dramatic or flashy, but because it was bulletproof. Teresa could not argue with a certified inspection report. She could not claim I was violating rules when an independent professional had already confirmed I was compliant. And she could not hide behind vague HOA guidelines when I had documentation proving she was enforcing rules that did not exist. The whole thing had taken 4 months from the tow to the final audit report. 4 months of documenting every email, every notice, every threat. 4 months of late nights pulling records and building timelines. 4 months of fighting a system that was rigged against me. But it had been worth it. The new parking guidelines were fair. The vendor contracts were transparent. The board had learned a hard lesson about oversight. And Teresa was gone. I still live in Rosewood Terrace. The neighborhood is quieter now. The enforcement signs are gone. The guest decal program is optional, and no one uses it because there is no penalty for skipping it. The tow truck does not patrol the streets anymore, and the handheld scanner that Teresa loved so much is sitting in an evidence locker somewhere, cracked screen and all. Every time I pull into my driveway, I think about that morning when the wheel lift was inches from my tire, and Teresa was standing there with her clipboard and her smug smile, thinking she had won. I think about the moment her scanner slipped from her hand and clattered across the pavement in front of the entire board. I think about the look on her face when Linda read the vendor contract out loud and exposed the kickback scheme. And I smile. Because the best revenge is not getting even. It is watching someone get hoisted by their own rules, and knowing you did not have to break a single law to make it happen. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.